Bhaktya Shukadhitaya.
A seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes the absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti purport. The absolute truth is realized in full by the process of devotional service to the Lord Vasudeva, or the personality Godhead, who is the full-fledged absolute truth. This is feeding off of the previous verse. So Brahman is his transcendental bodily effulgence, and Paramatma is his partial representation. As such, Brahman or Paramatma realization of the absolute truth is but a partial realization. There are four different types of human beings: the karmic jnanis, the yogis, and the devotees. The karmis are materialistic, whereas the other three are transcendental. The first class transcendentalists are the devotees who have realized the Supreme Person. Second class transcendentalists are those who have partially realized the plenary portion of the Absolute Person. And the third class transcendentalists are those who have barely realized the spiritual focus of the Absolute Person. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures, the Supreme Person is realized by devotional service, which is backed by full knowledge and detachment from material association. We have already discussed the point that devotional service is found by knowledge and detachment from material association, as Brahman and Paramatma realization are imperfect realizations of the absolute truth. So the means of realizing Brahman and Paramatma, i.e. the paths of Jnana and Yoga, are also imperfect means of realizing the absolute truth. Devotional service, which is based on the foreground, full knowledge combined with detachment from association, from material association, and which is fixed by oral reception of the Vedanta Shruti, is the only perfect method by which the seriously inquisitive student can realize the absolute truth. Devotional service is not, therefore, meant for less intelligent classes transcendentalists. There are three classes of devotees, namely first, second, and third class. The third class devotees, or the neophytes, who have no knowledge and are not detached from material association, but who are simply attracted by the preliminary process of worshiping the deity in the temple, are called material devotees. Material devotees are more attached to material benefit than transcendental profit. Therefore, one has to make definite progress from the position of material devotional service to the second class devotional position. In the second class position, the devotee can see four principles in the devotional line, namely, personality Godhead, his devotees ignorant and the envious. One has to raise himself at least to the stage of a second class devotee and thus become eligible to know the absolute truth. Paragraph. A third class devotee, therefore, has to receive the instructions of devotional service from the authoritative sources of Bhagavata. The number one Bhagavata is the established personality of devotee, and the other Bhagavatam is the message of Godhead. The third class devotee, therefore, has to go to the personality of devotee in order to learn the instructions of devotional service. Such a personality of devotee is not a professional man who earns his livelihood by the business of Bhagavatam. Such a devotee must be a representative of Shukadeva Goswami, like Sutta Goswami, and must preach the cult of devotional service for the all-around benefit of all people. A neophyte devotee has very little taste for hearing from the authorities. Such a neophyte devotee makes a show of hearing from the professional man to satisfy his senses. This sort of hearing and chanting has spoiled the whole thing. So, one should be very careful about the faulty process. The holy messages of Godhead, as inculcated in the Bhagavad Gita or in the Srimad Bhagavatam, are undoubtedly transcendental subjects, but even though they are so, such transcendental matters are not to be received from the professional man who spoils them, as the serpent spoils milk simply by the touch of his tongue. Paragraph. A sincere devotee must, therefore, be prepared to hear the Vedic literature like the Upanishad, Vedanta, and other literatures left by the previous authorities or Goswamis for the benefit of his progress. Without hearing such literatures, one cannot make actual progress. And without hearing and following the instructions, a show of devotional service will becomes worthless, and therefore a sort of disturbance in the path of devotional service. Unless, therefore, devotional service is established on the principle of Shruti, Smriti, Purana, and Pancharatra authorities, the make show of devotional service should at once be rejected. An unauthorized devotee should never be recognized as a pure devotee. By assimilation of such messages from the Vedic literatures, one can see the all-pervading, localized aspect of the personality of God within his own self. Confidence is called samadhi. You just fast track. Because these verses of chapter 2, they're summary verses that we discussed in country. This series of verses is Sutta Goswami responding to the first of the 6 questions asked by the sages of Vaisharanya. The circumstance is Shukadeva Goswami has completed narrating the entire Srimad Bhagavatam 12 cantos, and subsequently the sages located over there in Naimisharanya, they were planning to do a 1,000-year sacrifice, fire sacrifice. One after the next, after the next, after the next, 1,000 years, for the specific purpose of counteracting the pernicious effects of the age of Kali. And as they were about to commence, lo and behold, here comes Sutta Goswami. So they all stood up, offered him respects, etc., and discontinued that plan for the 1,000-year sacrifice, and instead they wanted to hear from the Sutta. And the person speaking on behalf of the many sages was Shaunaka Rishi. Shaunaka was the questioner, Sutta was the answerer. So the first question, that's the context. Please summarize the essence of all Vedic literature that challenge. Vedic literature best summarized the essence of this. So this is a summarization of the essence. And the summarization of the essence is the process and the objective of the process. The objective of the process is realization of the absolute truth. And the absolute truth has three features, that's what we did yesterday. And prior to yesterday, there was this process of devotional service, which is the means of realization of the absolute truth in fullness, has its corollary or byproduct or subset is knowledge and detachment. Or say it the other way, one need not endeavor separately for knowledge and detachment because the fruit of devotional service is knowledge and detachment. And knowledge and detachment that's complete, not incomplete. So there are other processes of cultivation of knowledge. The jnana process, at best, maximum, can give realization, a transcendental realization of the Brahman feature. At best. And not easy. Rare to achieve. Absolutely rare to achieve. And then, in addition, the process of yoga that may, if done assiduously under proper guidance and so forth, may give to the next level of transcendental realization of Paramatma, the partial manifestation of the Supreme Bhagavan, all pervasive, within every atom, within every entity, and everywhere. Partial. And then the source. So, the message, yesterday's message was, as a summarization, this process of devotional service leads to the Bhagavan realization. So here, in this verse, we're getting a little tour of the lesser, as well as the greater and greatest stage of realization. And just to summarize, let's have appreciation for what Prabhupada did. Appreciation of the vastness of what he's sitting there in Vrindavan, in that little room, Radharani temple, thinking of the world. And he hasn't seen the world, he hasn't been out of India, but he has a mandate to preach the world. In English-speaking parts of the world, so it's in English. And he's envisioning what the world doesn't know, and what the world needs to know, and how to say it so that the world that doesn't know can know. And that world, just listening to Srimad Prabhupada's recording lecture from this morning, here in India, it's many pious people and some demons. In the West, maybe demons, and sometimes people. So the audience is the demons, and how are demons going to understand transcendence? Yes. But that's the Bhagavatam, and he's the deliverer of the Bhagavatam, and so he's thinking of the audience. How do you understand this? But this was his mission, so some ethnic migrants. So he's sitting in the little room in Vrindavan, thinking how to have the world of demons understand transcendence. This is really straight. These features, the materialist, and four. And then three categories of transcendentalists. And the materialists are many subdivisions of materialists, and then the transcendentalists have three. From Karma and Bhagavan, and we need to realize Jnana, Yoga, and Bhakti. Detail, not here, but the detail from Bhakti Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami writes that the Jnana and Yoga process are not going to produce anything unless there's some Bhakti. we didn't detail how the Sun Doctrine takes this again, but it's accepting the Vedas as the source of Gyan, source of knowledge, and respecting that source as absolute truth, or that which delivers the absolute truth is honoring the source. Indirectly, but acknowledging there's something about them. That's the source of this transcendental knowledge. I need this source. So without clarity as to the source, there's some doctrine, some acceptance of the supreme entity. And for them, the supreme entity is Brahman. And what Brahman, definition by negation of what Brahman is. It's not this, not this, not this, not this, not this. That's what Brahman is. It's not material. That's what spiritual is. It's non-material. Somebody yesterday was just messaging me. What is listen personalist language? So there's no form, no qualities, no activities. Impersonal. So realization of Brahman is impersonal. It's a transcendental realization. And there's a happiness Brahma Sukha. It's right in the Bhagavatam. Brahma Sukha is the happiness in identifying with the eternal. And to identify with the eternal squarely and fully, there has to be some compassion, some jnana and vairagya. Couplet once again. But it's incomplete. Jnana, an incomplete vairagya. And therefore incomplete happiness, Brahma Sukha. Anyway, and on then second and third. The topmost realization is from Bhagavan teacher. And as we heard yesterday, or verse 11, the Bhagavan teacher includes the realization of the limited. Or if you have $1 million, you have $10 and $100. It's easy. If you have $1 million, you have $10 and $100. So if you have the realization of Bhagavan, the other realizations are there, including, that is, understanding, not just understanding, as Prabhupada writes here, sees, you can see the Supreme Person within everyone. It's not conceptual, it's an experience. And the experience, it stays with you. That means the different phases of time, it stays with you. And same for Bhagavan realization. It's not, oh, I like that verse in the Bhagavatam. It's not some limited moment in time that I have some, that may happen. Bhavavas, little drop of Krishna's kindness, elevating the devotee to a stage of experiencing the beyond, experiencing things. But with the absorption in devotee service, that means for one purpose only. So you can start eliminating the other purposes in categorically jnana and karma. Or karma again. Having that as a purpose. And for the most part, people that are pursuing religion or spirituality, the interest is attaining something higher, like heaven. Or even higher in heaven, depends on the individual. of the heavenly realm or the position of heaven, and so forth and so on. I'm pausing because there are circumstances where Indra and other demigods are a little about persons who are aspiring for transcendental, but they have a mix. And the mix, the trepidation is, those who have this mix and maybe doing something that's really strong and powerful, etc. But their idea, those performers, is to take our position. And so they make obstacles. They may. However, when they are clear that the person has no motivation, no material motivation, then they remove obstacles. They become agents of the personality of Godhead. 100%. They remove obstacles. So, in our path of devotional service, we want the favor of the personality of Godhead and his representatives in all respects. Because there's enough obstacles already. Too many. So by purpose, by the properly directed consciousness that has discerned by introspection and purification, I don't want other shelters. No, let's just say we're not there yet. Because we have other shelters, and there's aspiration for other shelters. Unless one is a pure devotee, one has aspiration for other shelters. It's not like shame on you. It's just, the state of conditioning that if we hear from the right source, we hear from one who is carrying Shuddha Bhakti, like the Bhagavatam is conveying Shuddha Bhakti, and the persons who speak it, not the professional reciters, as Prabhupada is saying, that pander to the whatever the people want, so they do this and that and the other thing because people want. And it's popular. And it's pervasive. When there is spirituality, it's a great disservice, but it's very common. Or say it the other way, pure devotional service is very uncommon, and the greatest service. And to recognize this as a source, fantastic. To pursue that source, that's arduous. But, that source of pure devotion has the power to at once is, what does that mean? Doesn't mean like you blink your eye and all of a sudden you're in the spiritual world. At once means, commonly our acharyas describe it, means relatively quickly compared to the eons that it takes to pursue the other paths where there's uncertainty at every step. At once means very quickly in comparison to other processes, particularly at once. Now, it is certainly possible that at once, without even a moment's delay, someone that's in another space can become at once. That is to say that the Supreme Pure has the power to purify anything at once. However, it depends upon the receptivity or the aspiration and desire. And generally, the aspiration and desire is, from the get-go, is less than pure because they're less than pure. So generally, it takes some time, some cultivation and perseverance by striving towards the process properly. there's another particular point I wanted to focus on. Thank you. Yeah. In the final paragraph at the very beginning, Prabhupada writes, a sincere devotee must, therefore, be prepared to hear Vedic literature like the Upanishads, Vedanta, and other literatures left by the previous authorities or Goswamis for the benefit of his progress. Now, a big part of what Srila Prabhupada did was, and in Srimad Bhagavatam and in Chaitanya Charitamrita, references are made here and there and elsewhere from other sources. Directly, in the case of Chaitanya Charitamrita, directly in the verses, and in both texts, in the purports, references again and again and again, without reading the entire range of all these literatures. One can read the Bhaktivedanta purports and get an essence message from these various sources, so that the proper understanding of what pure devotional service is, and that sound vibration being purifying in itself, can elevate the reader. So for at least within our capacity, hearing and studying and receiving and hearing classes and descriptions of based upon Prabhupada's writings and these other literatures, continue to hear with eagerness. And that's just reaffirming something in a previous verse, the eagerness to hear. Vedanta Shruti, that's the phrase that's used previously. Vedanta, that's the summary of all the Vedas, and that sound vibration is important to hear. That's our process, Shravanam, Kirtanam, and staying with that process entirely till as long as we live. And that sound vibration continuing to purify, continuing to lift and benefit others, benefit ourselves, to carry us to Krishna by that very process. That's my understanding of what's this first sentence. For the benefit of his progress. Literatures left by the previous authorities or Goswamis for the benefit of his progress. Like Srila Prabhupada made his Sri Ishopanishad translation and purports, or Jiva Goswami made his commentary, Gopal Tapani Upanishad and Gopal Tapani Tika. So it's not, they wrote those books, those are standing books, but there's commentary specifically towards the Bhagavan feature. And Gopal Tapani naturally is the Bhagavan feature. And Isha means Bhagavan also. And to how to conduct one's activities and pursuit of the goal of those activities with the proper orientation and commentary, so that we can understand those on the basis of authoritative literatures. That's the mention. That's the intention of mentioning this. Without hearing such literatures, one cannot make actual progress. And without hearing and following the instructions, the show of devotional service becomes worthless. So, range of hearing, applying, living one's life according, and adjusting some things are left behind, left to the side, and some other things become more prominent in our lives, and the purification towards what the original condition of the soul is. That's getting back to the question. The summarization of the ways of all the Vedas. Realization of the absolute truth and who we are, and leave aside the contamination and conditioning that we are so familiar with. And identify with. That's my interpretation this morning. Let's see if there's some discussion. Yes?
So if this is what we are, so in the last sentence, Prabhupada says this is called samadhi. I'm wondering that when you are in that progress and when you actually reach that stage or transcendental bliss or pure devotional service, like the ultimate stage, then wouldn't it be actually Krishna's choice to bring you back?
Wouldn't it be Krishna's choice?
No, wouldn't it be in the hands of Krishna to actually, wouldn't it all be Krishna's wish then? Meaning, you would really lose the desire to be, actually even going back. Like, you don't know. You just leave it to him, right? I always wonder,
Well, I don't understand the question.
So, the highest stage of perfection
Is not having aspiration for anything in nature, no. And even the aspiration for going back to Godhead, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's no longer even there, right?
Well, desire to be with Krishna is there in the stage of perfection. But desire to be with Krishna doesn't require a change of address. Consciousness. So the desire to go back to Godhead may, I want out of here, this place is crazy. The moksha aspiration, in the dimension of back to Godhead, the elimination of the material affinity, but there's spiritual affinity. So the desire to be with Krishna is a spiritual desire. And is it Manma Jamani Jamanadishware Bhavatad Bhakti or Haituki? It's the medium of that connection is Haituki Bhakti, or without hetu, without causation. Now, the departure of Srila Prabhupada from this world was a very emotional experience for those that were present or were participants directly or remotely, or it's a tragic. So, was Srila Prabhupada's meditation? He was with Krishna always. So what's the back to Godhead message? He's with Krishna always. He's with Krishna always, and Krishna is always with him. That's back to Godhead. So there's the back to Godhead where it's a change of address, and there's the back to Godhead where it's a change of consciousness. And the back to Godhead phrase, when people hear it, is a change of address. And the back to Godhead phrase for as one's Krishna consciousness becomes more elevated, it's a change of consciousness. Did that answer your question? Okay. Anyone else?
of years, especially in Indian tradition, I've seen this argument advance that bhakti is for the
Yes,
weak-minded.
yes, that was another point that
Right.
Prabhupada made here. Yes.
Yeah. I think that is stuck for even today. I've seen those who have, those who are more intellectually oriented, they still continue to see bhakti is for the weak-minded, and so they pursue knowledge or self-actualization kind of activities. They want to do it on their own versus surrendering to a supreme or a spiritual master. So my question is, do you see an opportunity for us as a society to advance arguments against this, to demonstrate or to show that bhakti process is actually the best process and also maybe for the smartest, not for the weak-minded?
Well, I have thought about this, but it's not my reply is not like a strategy as much as exhibiting those who are advanced in bhakti may be vastly more learned than the Gyanis and those who say bhakti is for the weak-minded. Now, it takes an exceptional devotee to have that acumen. You know, give some examples. Bhakti Siddhanta. You know, his Bhakti Siddhanta's mood, you know, it takes a great acharya, a person of great capacity. But those who said things like that would run the other direction when they saw him coming, because he was a lion. But it doesn't have to be the lion approach. It can be a vastly learned, and on the other end of the spectrum, supposing in the Sangha of Vaishnavas, there's somebody that's not vastly learned, but they're pure devotees. And then the exhibition is their character, or the qualities that they exhibit consistently, that surpass the qualities of the intellectuals, the character that surpasses that of the intellectuals, because common is, for those who are intellectuals and don't have bhakti, there's pride. And that's not good character, but it's common, if not consistent, because that's one of the, it's a false ego demonstration, and one of the first things to come and one of the last things to go. So, you know, such persons show their arrogance or their pride. So the person who is the devotee, who has scholarship, just in direct response to what you're asking, is the Bhaktivedanta Institute in its inception was to challenge scientists, but the Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Science, which is now the name of that same entity, is not just challenging the scientists. It's all kinds of things, like consciousness studies and so forth. So those who have bhakti and have profound command of the scripture and as well of worldly issues, that helps. That's a strategy. Here's your question. A strategy that helps the people that say, oh, bhakti is for the weak-minded. They're persons that are not at all weak-minded. and are vastly learned in the material and the spiritual sphere, or the scripture in the spiritual sphere, and the the worldly issues. Anyway, that's an answer. And not everyone has that capacity. Because someone doesn't have that capacity, they're not a lesser person than the one that has that capacity. But as a strategy for those who have, a snobby or a prideful attitude towards we're better than those people, is surpass them in their own realm, but by bhakti, not by scholarship or intellectual exhibitions. Okay. He needs the microphone? Right in front of you.
Sorry. Guru Maharaj, I was thinking about your point about professional Bhagavatam speaker. I mean, these days there are also devotees who are making their profession to, educate people, but charging money for that as well, like trying to be the, I think, self-help gurus or whatever nomenclature that are common these days. Do you see that they also sort of have the same kind of situation as professional Bhagavatam speakers who are charging money, or
Probably.
they are doing,
but not
bridging?
necessarily.
Okay.
I'll give a little example. This is a Prabhupada story. In the Brooklyn Temple, Henry Street, Sri Govinda came to have Prabhupada's association, this and that. I was in the room when this discussion was going on. So Sri Govinda, mentioned to Prabhupada, I'd like to make an arrangement for you to be a public speaker at such and such and such venue. It's popular, blah, blah, blah.
Maharaj, it was very inspiring to hear in the answer to her that you said that consciousness is not change of address. So I was thinking, oh yes, back to Godhead. So, so somebody can. Okay, my understanding is that somebody can actually go into, or Krishna can mercifully give a glimpse of what it feels like, or even closer or semblance of what it feels like to be back to Godhead, and then again somebody is lost in their world. Again somebody is lost in their world. Like for example, a sadhaka, yes, a sadhaka can get a glimpse and then be again part of this world. So it's not a linear progression of like back to Godhead. It could be a dynamic, revelation from Krishna for even a second or a moment, and then again somebody is back to a lower consciousness. So is it, I mean, my sense of my question is like a linear progression, or is it, it can be a spike and then...
Can be a what? What's the option?
Spike and then come down, gain some spike based on...
Krishna isn't teased. At least the giver. So he doesn't tease. But he may encourage. But generally speaking, once having experienced that, there's simply a hankering, and the mind doesn't go elsewhere from that hankering. And then it generally is not to tease. And that inspiration to be in direct contact with Krishna doesn't fade, it's not spike. The experience, but not the aspiration. The experience may be, but the aspiration doesn't. Even that moment of experience, it's by its very nature. Timelessness becomes one's frame of reference. That the being with Krishna is one's frame of reference. That's scriptural. Then you take the scripture and you want to evaluate what someone's experience might be. You have to look at scripture, not just guessing. Maybe, in my opinion, we can change the order to say something else.
You had a very different question perhaps. But how critical is it for a devotee going from first stage to second to third, for them to feel valued, in the process, to be able to move to that next stage?
Well, it's relationship. Supposing like hearing a lot of people tell by testimony, and some number of those devotees is going to be, just some very special exchange or witnessing Prabhupada's very special exchange with someone or something. And that's still with them. Maybe he doesn't think anymore. But that demonstration, or the exhibition of exchange with Prabhupada or someone with Prabhupada with someone, gives an inkling of the unlimited compassion and power and capacity and potency and mercy and all those things that are within our Acharya. And association with such persons is the channel. I'm just completed reading 5 years, 11 months. And in one circumstance, Vishaka writes that she and her husband had been separated from Prabhupada for 5 years and doing service. And then she was with Prabhupada again in Bombay. Prabhupada was in his room, in the 7th floor windows, and Prabhupada leaning back with his head, hands in his head, in a very relaxed situation. Because the health was really bad. And she said, she's just seeing Prabhupada, it's so wonderful to be with you. I was missing you so much. And Prabhupada made a sound and said, I never felt that way. She's and she writes, I've been missing 5 years. This is 35 years. So, what was the acceptance? Back to the question. They had association with Prabhupada says 5 or 6 times. Physical association. But the connection was, super powerful, enough to propel him to all that he did. That was it. Mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through his spiritual master. So the acknowledgement was in his heart, not otherwise. Not what people may think is, and how did Prabhupada acknowledge devotees? Always. And sometimes it was folded, but acknowledging and encouraging and this and that. So back to the question, how important is it? If one is capable of receiving acknowledgement that's enduring, then it didn't take much. When one doesn't have the capacity to acknowledge encouragement and recognition that's not enduring, they need not to pass in the head. That's not very powerful. Not as powerful. Come think close. Anyway, that is
follow quickly and observe.
And it takes an empowered representative of Krishna to know when and what and how and all those things. And there's another.
Can you give this to me?
Yeah.
Because you're battery in the microphone, right?
This I really like. Because I just finished it. Vishaka's book is filled with little jewels, and one of them was Prabhupada had been away, and he had come back to visit in New York. And this is quite early on in the movement. And one of the early devotees, his name was Rishi Kumar. But Rishi Kumar, I didn't know this until I read her book, but Rishi Kumar initially was like a superlative devotee, but somehow he had slackened. And he not only slackened in his practices, but he became critical of Prabhupada. Explicitly critical, like explicitly. And when Prabhupada came to spend some time in New York, the devotees advised him, Rishi Kumar, don't, I don't think it's a good idea if you eat his cooking because he's offensive towards you. And then Prabhupada just overlooked all that and said, he didn't consider it at all. He gave his encouragement without considering it at all, the offensiveness, whatever. I don't know what came of it. I don't know what came before and during and after. But that our founder Acharya decided to give his acknowledgement and appreciation where he could have said, oh, thank you. I don't want to eat the cooking of someone that's offensive. So it takes acumen to know when and how and in what way. But an elevated person doesn't need any of that. Now, so back then, I'm still responding to the question: how important is it? Depends.
Because I asked you about dysfunctional families, those who are.
Yes, I remember that question.
As we know, there's a whole range of dysfunctional families.
Oh, yeah.
Most of us fall within that category these days.
Yeah.
So there is a need for a lot of pats on the head or back for devotees who have endured such experience in their life. So, but is it appropriate to expect transcendental personalities, gurus, guides, to give those pats on the head, or should our because that
My answer is the same answer. It depends. Those that have the acumen to see where it's needed and where leaving the person alone or putting him in a hot seat. What's appropriate. So you're back to your question. It's not reasonable to expect, because a proper personality that's actually a transcendental personality, they can evaluate case by case, circumstance by circumstance, person by person. Now there's the general, and then there's the particular. The general is yes, and then the particular is maybe, depends. Their capacity is always there. The sun is always shining, giving light. And in some cases, there may be silence. In some cases, it may be something else or something else. And then it's purposeful, or there's a consciousness, a Krishna-guided purpose behind the activities of an elevated Vaishnava, whoever, guru or mentor or a senior personality. But then, the evaluation of who is in that caliber takes some time, and a person who is an elevated individual that doesn't look at only at externals, but they can look beyond the externals. Okay, we're going to end. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.